Members of the public, welcome to our meeting. First point I'd like to make is, well, first of all, can you make sure that your mobile phones are either switched off or switched to silent so that we're not disturbed? And I should have to remember to do mine while I'm at it. Fire regulations, we have no plans at all for any form of fire alarms except fire alarms, so if one sounds off, it's a real fire. There are 3 emergency exits, one through the way that you came in, behind the councillors at the back there and to my right, and if you all leave as swiftly as possible, and we would assemble under the Waitrose canopy. Now so let's start the meeting now. So with minutes of the previous meeting, they've been on the table for at least 30 minutes, and on the website, I believe. Is it your wish that I should assign them as a true record? Agree. Thank you very much. Apologies for absence.
We have apologies from Councillors Peter Isherwood, Carol Coburn, Pat Frost, Stephen Hill, David Hunter, Stephen Mulliner and Liz Wheatley. Councillors Jim Edwards, Jenny Else and Nick Williams are attending as substitutes.
Thank you very much. Any disclosures of interest?
None before the meeting, Chairman.
And questions from members of the public?
None received.
Thank you very much. So we now move on to the agenda. Planning item A1, it's WA 2014-1330, the outline application for the erection of up to 50 dwellings, together with new access, parking, landscaping, open space and children's play area and associated works, with all matters reserved except access, as amended by letter dated the 9th of the 12th 2014 and plan received on the same day, amended by letter the 2nd of the 1st 2015 and received on the 5th of the 1st, and revised flood risk assessment received on the 5th of the 1st 2015, amplified by information received 1905 2015 and amplified by letter dated 26th of the 5th 2015, and the land is at Furs Lane, Godalming. Officers, would you like to open the presentation?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As by way of introduction, I shall introduce the application and pass on to William Clark to talk you through the plans. Members will recall that we were sat in this chamber on the 21st of April 2015 to discuss this application, where members resolved to defer the application to seek more information from the County Council regarding drainage and flooding. Specifically, members requested that officers seek the informal views of the lead local flood authority and get some information on the contamination to the site to the north. We have that information and William's going to talk you through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Okay, so this is the application site. So it's land situated towards the east of Furs Lane. We're on the outskirts of Godalming. So we have the B3000 towards the north, which is the Compton to Guildford Road. We have the Northbourne development situated towards the west of the site, and we have Furs Lane moving towards the southwest, and also we have Birch Road situated towards the southeast of the site, situated along here as such. The site is currently used for agriculture purposes. There's just a number of grazing horses on the site at the moment, and is demarcated by on the sort of northwestern boundary of the site with a post and a wire fence and sort of garden fencing, trees and hedging along the southwestern border of the site, and similarly this site here, this boundary here. The application site is also bounded by a drainage ditch situated on the northern boundary of the site, and also the southeastern boundary of the site as well. Okay. This is just an aerial view of the site. This gives you perhaps a better sort of aerial context of the site. So again, we have the Northbourne development, Birch Road, and the B3000 situated towards the north. And again, just a wider context site location plan as well for the proposed development. The application is for outline planning permission for up to 50 dwellings on the site, with all matters reserved apart from the issue of access. The proposed access into the site would come off the existing mini roundabout along Firs Lane with a main central arterial route progressing throughout the site and culminating in a turning area at the end of the road. All the dwellings will be centred along the proposed arterial route and will vary. Well, this is only indicative at the moment, but the proposal is to have 2.5 stories and 3 stories, a range of heights of properties throughout the development. There will be a mixture as well of hard and soft landscaping, and there will be a sort of main public central point to the development, which will be here, consisting of soft and hard landscaping, and will also the proposal will also include individual parking for each of the properties as well. The proposal also includes a proposed open space towards the north, which is this area as such, which will be open to the general public as well as residents of the proposed development, and a LEAP, a local area of equipped play, I think, which will be situated in this corner of the site. Again, you can see the drainage ditches towards the north and the side of the site. There is a proposed, I should say, just maintenance access. The agent has confirmed, and it's contained within the agenda, that it was a mistake in the plans that with reference to the emergency access, so it would just purely be for maintenance access for the proposed drainage ditch. Again, this is indicative landscape strategy plan, so we're showing the proposed planting and tree planting as situated throughout the site. This, I hope, gives a good indication of the flood zone situated within the site. So we can see that the darker area here is the flood zone 3, so the area most at risk of flooding. Moving on to flood zone 2, which is this area here. And then the remainder of the site, where the majority of development is situated, in flood zone 1. This plan gives an extent of the AONB and AGLV. So this green line here demarks the extent of the Surrey Hills AONB, which actually falls along the Firs Lane Road site here, with the AGLV situated throughout the remainder of the site. And we can actually see the Waverley Borough Council administrative boundary situated again towards the northern part of the site as such. And obviously the red line obviously demarks the site as being a reserved site within the local plan. As mentioned at the start, the proposal is for with all matters reserved apart from access. So as we can see, the proposal would include a new access off the mini roundabout with alterations to the sort of the curves of the road, with the relocation of the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit signs to the northern part of Firs Lane, which is currently more or less around here, I think, moving further up the road, with also relocation of the existing bus stop, which is probably more or less around here, to sites both here and here. This plan as well, I hope, gives members a good feeling of the gradients throughout the site. The site doesn't vary in ground levels hugely throughout the site. There is a drop in ground level towards the north and northeastern boundary of the site, but as you can see from the plans, there isn't a great drop in ground levels. Okay, in a moment I'll pass it over to Barry to discuss the determining issues, but I'll just would like to refer members to the update sheet. So the first point is in terms of amendments to the report, there is an amendment to page 46 of the agenda under affordable housing, which should make reference to Godalming. There was a mistake within the report that it made reference to Hazelmere, and those are the correct figures are set out within the table below. In terms of responses from consultees, we've had an email back, which I think members should have got a copy of yesterday, along with a site visit on Monday, from the lead local authority, which essentially sets out a number of points that the county raised, but overall the county are content with the proposal in terms of flooding issues, and I believe these can be covered by conditions, which I'll come to in just a moment. And on top of that as well, the Council's flooding consultant, RPS, have commented on the applicant's information with regards to the likely surface water runoff rates from the scheme. Just to confirm that the proposed discharge rate of 5 litres per second, which is detailed within the submitted calculations, is standard practice, because a discharge rate lower than that could result in problems with blockages of the system and therefore surcharging in flooding. Yeah. In terms of heads of terms, just like to point out that contributions in order to meet the recently adopted SIL regulations have been justified for a number of infrastructure improvements, and these will consist of primary education, equipped and casual play space, recycling and transport outside the town centre. There's been a number of additional representations since the publication of the recent agenda, which a number of residents of the nearby Tilton's Green have raised concern regarding the potential impact the proposal may have on the existing drainage culverts near Tilton's Corner Road, and neighbouring properties in Tilton's Green, Tilton's House, as well as the nearby industrial estate as well. And also there was a question raised about the increased flow rate into the adjacent watercourse by an increase of 500%, but as mentioned in the comments from RPS, that wouldn't be the case. In terms of amendment to conditions informative, there has been an amendment to condition 21 of the agenda. That condition has been amended in order to capture the comments raised by the lead local flood authority, so the condition now incorporates the sort of issues regarding infiltration and surface water runoff. So that condition, as I say, has been amended in order to capture those points that the county have raised. In terms of amendments to conditions as well, it's not actually on the update sheet, but I just already update this now to members. There is a proposal to remove condition 10 of the agenda, which makes reference to an electrical vehicle charging point. That is still covered by condition, I think it's 18, I think, of the agenda, which still covers that point. Oh, sorry.
78.
78 of the agenda.
18 is on 81.
And condition 18 is page 81 of the agenda. So as I say, condition 10 is to be removed, and condition 18 is to be kept in place. And there was also an additional condition to be proposed, which would require details of the proposed maintenance access to be submitted and approved by the local authority before any works commence on the site. In terms of any additional officer comments, it might be worth bringing members' attention to a couple of relevant appeal decisions from other authorities, which raise this subject of whether effectively doubt by planning inspectors as to whether a sequential test would be required, given that the proposals in those particular authorities were wholly located within flood zone 1, and these are, and members should have a copy of those appeal decisions as part of it. So. Yeah. Sorry. Is that better? Sorry. Yeah. Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So yes, as I say, there was a couple of recent appeal decisions which, as I say, raised doubt as to whether a sequential test would be required, in these particular local authorities, as the proposals would be located within flood zone 1. And as I say, members should have a copy of those appeal decisions as part of the update sheet.
We should have what we do now.
There is, yeah. Okay, and then in response to the many of the objections raised, maybe the members' attention advised that the scheme would not result in additional surface water over and above that at present being discharged into the drainage ditch. It is only the speed at which it would be discharged into the ditch that could be altered. And as I said before, the revised condition 21 that I've just mentioned will be will cover those particular points in order to agree an appropriate runoff rate. I'll pass you back now to Barry, who will guide you members through determining issues of the proposal.
Thank you. If I now take you through the determining issues on screen, those matters of principal technical opinion and those matters of judgment. If I take you first to the left-hand side, starting with the environmental impact assessment, the site has been screened and it's been concluded that the proposal will not fall within the EIA regulations and therefore an environmental statement is not required. Next, on to lawful use of the land and loss of agriculture. As William's already alluded to, the site is currently used for grazing of horses. The council's agricultural consultants have assessed the scheme and conclude that the site is of a poor quality, grade 3 to 4, and the work required in order to bring the land up to a good quality would be unviable and in any event may fall foul of the Common Agricultural Reform Regulations and therefore not be applicable in any event. So therefore officers consider that the loss of the agricultural land would not result in the loss of the most versatile land or cause the alienation of a viable agricultural holding. Next, on to highways considerations, including impact on traffic and parking. The County Highway Authority have assessed the scheme and subject to highway mitigation being the contribution of £85,000 towards improvements at Furs Lane at New Pond Road Junction and also pedestrian safety and accessibility improvements between the site and Farncombe. Subject to those improvements, there would be no detriment to highway safety. Now, looking at air quality, the application site does not fall within an air quality management area, although air quality is still important, and the Council's environmental health officers have proposed mitigation through electrical charging points and also a construction environmental management plan. Subject to that mitigation, there would be no issues with regards to air quality. Next, on to flood risk and drainage. As you have seen on screen, the majority of the site falls within flood zones 1, with areas to the north in flood zones 2 and 3. All of the developable area, that being the houses, are proposed within flood zones 1. Notwithstanding, the applicant has submitted information to enable the officers to go through a sequential test, and officers conclude that there are no alternative sites identified at a lower risk of flooding which would be appropriate for the proposed development, and as such it would pass the sequential test. Looking at drainage, as William has already referred to, the application has been assessed by the lead local flood authority, drainage engineers, has been assessed by RPS, Waverley's external consultants, and also the Tiltham's Residents Association have had drainage assessed by an independent consultant. All three bodies arrive at the same conclusion, that the site would not cause or exacerbate flooding by way of surface water drainage. So what
I'm sorry, we're not open to discussion with the members of the public. I'm sorry, could you, are you, I'm sorry, if you continue to interrupt the meeting, then we will have to ask you to leave. If you continue to interrupt the meeting, we'll have to leave. I'm sorry, we have a report which and we'll have public speakers to come here tonight, and therefore we can consider.
I've been told I can't, and I'm sitting here listening to basically a load of liars.
Would you please? Would you either please desist from? Would you please desist from interrupting the meeting, or would you or leave? I'm sorry, or we will have to close the meeting.
Well, I prefer it closed because I like this deferred until proper consultation.
Could you now leave, please? I'm sorry, but you're just interrupting the meeting. We're not allowed to get on with the job. You have your opinions. Other people have their.
Point of order, Chairman.
Yes.
Point of order. If this carries on, we'll have to clear the public galleries. Thank you.
Thank you. So if you continue on, sir, then we will have to clear the whole public gallery.
Don't worry, if I hear any more nonsense, I'll go.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So with regards to drainage, if I can draw members' attentions to conditions 21, 22 and 23, they all control surface water drainage, flows thereof and design, and maintenance of the surface water drainage is captured by legal agreement. Moving now on to archaeology, the county archaeologist has had a look at the scheme and it's considered that this proposal will not cause any detriment to any archaeological remains of any value. Looking at infrastructure, if I can take you to the update sheet, there is a section on infrastructure which now sets out what the heads of terms would cover by way of payments to that infrastructure. Now looking at biodiversity and compliance with Habitat Regulations 2010, as I said, the site is of no visual quality and also not of major ecological quality given the use it's currently at, and officers consider that we would not be contravening any of the biodiversity regulations. Now coming on to contaminated land, there was concern from some members about the operations that are taking place to the north of the site and the waste that's been deposited. Now, I've had informal discussions with the relevant enforcement bodies, that of Guildford, the County Council and the Environment Agency, and what I do have is a copy of a note from the county planning team that they would be the body that would enforce against waste, being the Waste Authority, and they confirm in their letter to their committee of November 2013 that the waste is soil, hardcore, chalk, black drop, brick, concrete, green waste, wood waste, materials, commercial waste and domestic waste with no planning permission. So that identifies that the majority of the waste on that site is of an inert, non-hazardous substance. And notwithstanding, I would draw members' attention to paragraph 122 of the framework, where it clearly tells us that when we're dealing with matters such as this, we are to accept that pollution control regimes outside of planning work effectively. If I now take you to the right-hand side of the screen to matters of judgment, looking at the impact on visual amenity, as I've already alluded to, the application site is a featureless site whose main role is to provide a buffer between Farncombe and the AONB, which is to the north of the site. So looking at the site in context, officers consider that even though the application is in outline only, a scheme can be arrived at that would not have a detrimental impact on the visual amenity of Farncombe or the surrounding area. Looking now at impact on residential amenity, as I've already said, the application is in outline. Officers consider, given the indicative layout plan that's been submitted, there's sufficient space around the properties so as not to cause any loss of residential amenity by way of overlooking, overshadowing or overbearing. Now moving on to location of development, members will be aware of paragraph 55 of the framework that tells us we should be resisting isolated dwellings in rural areas. Now, officers consider this site is not isolated in terms of its remoteness or loneliness. It's well connected to the facilities in Farncombe. It's not tremendously far away from the train station, and there are schools in the nearby location or locality. Looking now at housing mix and density, officers consider that the mix and density is broadly in line with that of the Strategic Housing Market Assessment draft 2014, and therefore would be acceptable in this regard. Turning our attention to affordable housing, 40% of the scheme is proposed to be affordable, that's 20, with 75% to be rented, 75% to be rented, 25% to be shared ownership. Now looking on impact on the countryside beyond the green belt. Again, as I've said on numerous occasions, the site is a featureless site. Its main role is to provide a buffer. Half of the site would retain that buffering impact between the AONB and the countryside beyond the green belt. So this is not an issue that we consider exists. Now turning to impact on HLV and adjacent AONB, Section 85 of the Countryside Rights of Way Act tell us that we should pay regard to preserving and enhancing the AONB. The AONB Joint Advisory Board, Clive Smith, has advised that he considers the scheme would not have a detrimental impact on that AONB, and officers concur with his conclusions. Now going to provision of amenity and play space. As William has already shown on the screen, the proposed application includes an area for play. So then if I take you to the revised recommendation, which is as set out on page 4 of the update sheet, and it is that subject to completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the provision of 40% affordable housing, highway and transport improvements, and infrastructure including primary education, play space, open space, and recycling for the setting up of a management company to manage open spaces and the SUD scheme, subject to conditions 1 to 33, amended condition 21, and the additional and removed conditions as covered as part of the oral update, and informative 16 on pages 74 to 88 of the agenda, permission be granted. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. So we have two groups of two public speakers. If Mr. Alvarez would like to come forward, you have a maximum of 5 minutes, and you'll have a warning light system. You may well have spoken before, I think I remember you, and speak when you're ready. And if you go beyond 5 minutes, I will ask you to close. And may I remind members of the public, while we're doing this is a meeting held in public. It is not a public meeting, and therefore your contributions are not accessible or agreeable. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. I'm speaking on behalf of Birch Road residents and in response to the latest officer's report for this application, and voice again our objection to the proposed development at Firs Lane. Some of our affected residents who are elderly or infirm are not able to attend. We are very surprised that we're back here again so soon, given the majority of issues and concerns raised at the JPC meeting in April have not been fully resolved or answered. Yet again, it appears that you as the JPC are being asked to approve the application with incomplete or ambiguous documentation. You have all been sent in advance of this meeting an email from Mr and Mrs Bridges detailing residents' concerns in relation to the development, which were as follows. First point, surface water flooding in Firs Lane. Surrey County Council have confirmed that the road flooded in 2013 and 2014. This is still an unresolved issue. Members tasked the officers to seek advice from the SCC regarding surface water flooding and the use of SUDs. The LLFA have replied but have raised a number of concerns regarding this document and the assumptions used within it, specifically access to the homes through back gardens to access the SUDs. Will the JPC be happy to approve without the LLFA concerns resolved? How can you as the JPC approve this application when the site has flooded 2 years running? And are the JPC happy to approve given the potential lawsuits from residents at Tiltham's Green and Birch Road if our homes are flooded? Second point, site access and egress. As stated, the original location of the emergency access point floods and has done so as recently as November of last year. The road was closed and had to be pumped out. The access point also flooded in 2013 and 14. We have emails from SCC confirming this fact. The developer in his letter dated 26th of May has now advised that there is no longer a need for them to provide an emergency access point after consultation with the Highways Authority. This contradicts what the officers stated within their report that an emergency access point is a requirement of the proposed development and underlined at the last JPC meeting. Where's the official response from the Highways Authority to confirm this? Will the JPC be happy to approve this without sight of it? And why, despite the evidence of flooding at these points, has the developer continued to insist these access points remain despite members' objections at the April meeting? We fully expect you as the JPC to satisfy yourselves that any alternative sites of the access and egress points are not liable to flooding. Third point, proof of ownership of the Northern Watercourse and maintenance. The developer is intending to discharge surface water runoff from the proposed site into the Northern Watercourse. You've already been advised that the existing drainage to the rear of Birch Road and Northbourne is still an issue, and therefore the proposal will fail and potentially flood our homes even if this watercourse is kept clear. The developer has now confirmed they are the legal owners of the ditch. However, we understand that the evidence is ambiguous and needs to be confirmed outright. This information is a direct contradiction to that communicated to both residents and members at the last JPC meeting and since inception. How can the application be approved when the ownership issues are not resolved? How can the JPC approve the application without being satisfied that the surrounding network of pipes is fit for purpose and maintained in the long term? Our fourth point, flood map challenge is a sequential test. The Environment Agency have informed the Officer in Development that a formal flood map challenge must be made. Otherwise, without this challenge, some of the proposed homes will be in the wrong category for insurance purposes. The developer advised in a letter 26th of May that a formal flood map challenge will not be made until planning permission has been granted. So how is it that a sequential test can be fairly and rigorously applied if no flood map challenge has been completed? In addition to this, the sequential test has still only been applied to Godalming as opposed to the whole borough. Therefore, are you as the JPC happy to approve the application knowing the test has not been fairly and rigorously applied? And also, are you prepared for any lawsuits should it be proved that this process was not followed properly and our homes are subsequently flooded and it was shown that there were more appropriate sites not prone to flooding that should have been considered? Contamination of land. In terms of the land contamination, have the JPC satisfied themselves that the contamination concerns raised at the last JPC meeting by members have been addressed? Also, are the JPC satisfied that Waverley will not be subject to future lawsuits over any potential injury or death to residents and that children are safe regarding the use of the play area? So, to summarise, no one is going to say job well done if it all goes to plan in the future and we don't flood. However, if our homes are flooded in the future, then each of you will have to justify your decisions to approve. Given the lack of clarity and completeness of the information discussed, I would not want any of you to make that decision. Therefore, please decline this application both now and in the longer term. Councillors, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you very much. Good timing. And we now have the agent, Tony Charles and Neil Jackson. I believe you're going to share the 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, and good evening, members. My name is Tony Charles. I'm the agent for the applicant. You may recall I spoke to you at the April committee. As members will know, the application site is allocated as a reserve housing site in Saved Local Plan Policy H3 of the 2002 plan. To clarify the ownership, Crowdace has owned the site since 1988, and to clarify the point about the Northern Watercourse, this is all in the ownership of Crowdace, and formal confirmation of that has been provided to the case officer. That confirmation takes the form of the land registry documentation that accompanied the purchase of the site, so there's absolute clarity about that. Crowdace do own the whole of the Northern Watercourse. Site's been brought forward for development now because the circumstances in relation to the 5-year housing land supply envisaged in the local plan at paragraph 6.2 now exist. That's the well-known housing shortage in the borough because of the delay with the local plan. 20 of the proposed 50 dwellings would be provided as affordable units, that's 40%. The borough has a significant and urgent unmet need for housing, particularly affordable housing. There are no physical, social, environmental or infrastructure constraints that would prevent the site being developed immediately. Further information has been provided in respect of the matters raised by members at the 21st of April committee, and in our view these issues have been fully addressed. I commend the officer's recommendation to the planning committee and request that the committee resolve to grant outline planning permission subject to conditions and subject to the completion of a section 106 agreement. At this point, Chairman, I will leave the seat and hand over to my colleague Neil Jakes. Neil is the consulting engineer for the applicant. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. My name is Neil Jakes. I'm Associate Director for Motion. We are retained by the applicant to advise on drainage and flood and risk matters. Motion has carried out a sequential test and flood risk assessment on behalf of the applicant. The sequential test concludes that there are no other sites which can be regarded as being more appropriate for development than the application site. The FRA demonstrates that the built development is located outside of the 100-year plus climate change event resulting from river flooding, and the development satisfies the requirements of National Plan and Policy Framework with regards to flood risk and surface water management, as being a location appropriate for development. The SUDS drainage strategy for the development is to restrict the discharge from the site to a practical minimum and provide on-site attenuation to balance the volume of runoff. As such, there is no increase in flooding to the development itself or third parties as a result of the development. At the request of the committee members, we have consulted with the lead local flood authority, Surrey County Council, and we do not foresee any issues with incorporating their recommendations into the scheme at the detailed design stage, which can be appropriately conditioned. We would like to reiterate that the Environment Agency has not raised any objections to the scheme, subject to suitable planning conditions. They have confirmed that the information provided is suitable with regards to this planning application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, madam, can you please either stop interrupting or leave? As a matter of fact, I mean, that the flooding that you are depicting, I will, if I may, members, make this statement, was, I think, on the 2013 floods, which was the worst that we'd had in Surrey for since 1968. It wasn't quite as bad as 1968 in some parts of this area, but it was worse, I know, in Godalming particularly. And yes, my garden was severely flooded, but I wasn't flooded out of my home, but some of my neighbours were. So we know and understand the problems. I'm sure many of my colleagues do. So can I now open up the debate now? Members, would you like to speak to the application and the concerns that are being expressed?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to ask for some clarity, please, because it seems to me that the biggest single issue of worry on this is the flooding. And I notice, and I'd just like some explanation, please, does the fact that this application passes the sequential test negate the need for it to pass the exception test? That's one question. And my next question is, I don't see any, if the committee are minded to approve this, I don't see any reference to a cycle track anywhere for access, pedestrian safety and accessibility improvements, drop curbs, tactile paving and pedestrian refuge facilities, but nothing mentioning cycle tracks. So if there is something in this report that I've missed, I'd just be grateful for clarification on that as well, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to the first question about sequential test, yes, if you pass the sequential test, you don't have to go on and pass the exception test. So we're okay with that one. And then, William, with regards to, in any event, this would pass the exception test. The exception test is there to design to, would this exacerbate flooding? Is it safe? In any event, it would not exacerbate flooding, and it is safe for its proposal. With regards to cycling, I don't see any reference to cycling. The local authority, or local highway authority rather, or the county highway authority, are looking for money for accessibility into Farncombe. They're asking for a fixed amount, £85,000, to improve accessibility. If members are wanting for that to explore the possibility of a cycle route, that is something we can share with the county highways authority if you're minded to approve. Thank you.
You would like to come back?
Thank you very much, Chairman. You've said that it passes the exception test, and yet on page 17, the Environment Agency say it's failed to meet the requirements of the second part of the flood risk exception test. Is there a reference further on in this report? Because I read it as thoroughly as I could, and I couldn't see any other reference to the exception test. As I say, on page 17, it says it's failed to meet the requirements.
This was because originally when the application was submitted, there was some of the development, the houses, were within flood zones 2 and 3. The applicant remodelled what was on site, and following the remodelling, you have the Environment Agency's additional comments on pages 19, 20, 21 and 22, where the issue about sequential test and exception test has been addressed and no longer raised. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Edwards.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of queries here. With regard to housing density, the surrounding residential density is 28 residents per hectare. This plan's residential density of 20.2 per hectare. If we had 28, it equates to 70 new homes on that site, which would be in accordance with the other homes in that area, which means an extra 8 affordable homes, which is a big number for us, because the availability of affordable homes is paramount in our planning, and we should be looking, if possible, to get more homes on that site. However, with regard to the proposed elevations, nearly all, if not all, adjoining or local properties are either 1 or 2 story properties. It has been mentioned that there would be some 2.5, I don't know what 2.5 stories means, okay, or 3 story properties, which would be out of context in this particular site. I would urge the developer to keep it to a maximum of 2 stories, and when they come up with the final plans, hopefully the Joint Planning Committee will address that problem. The landscape park value, apart from the buffer aspect, the site does not have any intrinsic or special landscape value. This is according to Surrey Hills AONB. I've got a query on prematurity. I accept the officer's reasons for disregarding this reason for refusal. However, please explain on page 38, okay, paragraph 1, it says, and maybe I've got all of the wrong way in the stick here, the emerging plan is at an advanced stage, but is not yet formally part of the development plan for the area. In the 3rd paragraph, it says, officers conclude that the emerging local plan is not at an advanced stage. What does that mean? I'm at a loss there. One other point, on the revised recommendation on the update sheet, the lead local flooding authority say they need to see evidence of how the storage volume would be achieved. Should this be part of the condition that they should approve that? You know, do you understand what I'm saying there? Okay, thank you.
Barry, would you like to come back?
If I can just touch on the prematurity issue, where you have on page 37, we have under prematurity we have little a, and then turning on to 38 we have little b. They're the questions you have to ask yourself to see whether it would be premature. One of the questions is the plan at an advanced stage? That's little b. The answer to that is the final paragraph, no, it's not at advanced stage, if that makes sense. So little b is the question, is it at an advanced stage? The final paragraph is the answer, no, it's not. So therefore, to refuse it on prematurity wouldn't be something I would advise. With regards to the lead local flood authority, we would, and also RPS consultants, be seeking their advice when discharging any conditions with regards to surface water drainage. So it wouldn't be done in isolation, it would be done through the advice of the experts with regards to surface water and drainage.
It would help if they put that, explain that in the recommendation. I wouldn't have to ask the question then. Okay, thank you.
I wonder whether you're the only one who's misunderstood that, but it's an interesting question. Councillor Veroreski, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I find myself absolutely flabbergasted that this report has come back to us with the information that it contains. I'm really disappointed because the information in it is conflicting and it's confusing. The information coming forward doesn't go far enough for me to sit here tonight and say we've got it right. Members of the gallery are obviously very passionate because we're talking about their livelihoods, their well-being, their homes and so forth and so forth. And I think we've done very little to allay their fears. We're going round in circles here. One of the issues that I hear time and time again, and the developer mentioned it, is our 5-year land supply. Are we seriously saying, because we've seen it so many times before, that we will jeopardise the future of homes and families so as we can meet our 5-year supply? Isn't it surely about putting homes in appropriate locations? Why are we as a council insisting? It's not the first application that's come before us like this. Why are we insisting in putting homes in flood zones, whether they be 1, 2 or 3? The NPPF clearly states that brownfield sites should be used before greenfields, and we still haven't explored that fully. Now, if we go to the sequential test, the sequential test going back a few months ago was very much a buzzword, very much designed to confuse and make it difficult to understand. And it is difficult to understand. I'm still not convinced as to why the sequential test is not being applied borough-wide. To say that this site is appropriate because it falls within the sequential test remit is utter nonsense. We have to apply it borough-wide. Conditions 21, 22, 23 don't go far enough. Interesting enough, ownership of the watercourse. I'd like more clarification on that. I went on the first, going back in April, I went on the site visit and I'd heard it say to me at the time, that's not our responsibility. That bit's our responsibility, but that's not our responsibility. Can somebody please make it clear whose responsibility it is? Affordable homes. No one can deny we need affordable homes. Nobody can deny that. But again, our affordable homes should be in places where they are not in flood zones. Let's not make this a reason to provide affordable homes, because what we're saying is we're downgrading our affordable homes into an area that potentially risk, and we're almost denying ourselves the fact. The other thing that concerns me about this is I don't feel I have enough information about the management company who are going to look after the parkland and who are going to look after the urban drainage system. So I, for one, don't feel here tonight that I have enough information that satisfies me that this scheme is a good one, and I can only say I'm very disappointed, having waited this amount of time, that again I could not go along with the officer's recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Well done.
Would you like a break and a bigger clap, or can we keep the evening quiet? Thank you very much. I hope you also clap then the people who say something against you, but never mind. Councillor Goodrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. When we were here on the 21st of April, the two main issues that we were unhappy about or wanted more information about, as has been said, was the contamination from the land next door and the drainage flooding situation. So far as the contamination is concerned, we've heard what has been said about the likely contaminants that are on the land to the north of this site. I had heard rumour, and it's probably only rumour, that it could have been asbestos. which was a concern. But when one looks at the conditions that have been imposed on this outline application, with conditions 4, 5, and 6 and 7, it does seem to me that a lot of work has got to be done to ensure that there is not contamination. And that gives me comfort to see that the conditions that are there are there to protect all the residents in the area to ensure that there isn't contamination. The development that we've, or the change in situation that has occurred since the last meeting is that we are told that the northern ditch is owned by the applicant. Knowing what land registry plans are and the scale of them, the thickness of the line on the edge of a plan is about the width of a drainage ditch. So, but at the end of the day, we are not here to decide or to be involved in, and it's not a planning matter, no doubt the officers will tell us, about ownership of the land. But if the applicant does own the land, of course it does give the applicant more clout in sorting out the northern ditch and ensuring that it's properly maintained, and conditions when we get to detail could have more about that when we know about the contamination, if there is any, and also the drainage flooding situation. So I am now content, if I might put it that way, that there's no more information needed on contamination, and that that is very adequately covered by the detailed conditions. So far as the drainage flooding situation, we have to rely on expert reports that we have received. And as I understand it, and I would be grateful if the officers would correct me if I've got it wrong, it's accepted that there has been flooding in Firs Lane. Indeed, I've seen it and tried to travel through it and couldn't. But what we are being told is this development will not make it any worse. It's not a cure for the flooding, and after all, an applicant hasn't got a duty to sort out all the flooding problems of Godalming. But what I understand, and all the conditions that have been imposed, will ensure that the flooding situation in that part of Farncombe will not be any worse than it is now. And on that basis, and with all the conditions and the SUDs and all the other things that have been put into the conditions, which I'm not going to go through in detail, are there to ensure that that happens, that it's not any worse. And with the possibility that the northern ditch could actually be more effective than it currently is. I'm therefore satisfied myself that, and having got the information from the County Council as the lead authority, who needn't have given us any information because this application was prior to the 15th of April, but they've still nevertheless provided it, which is what we deferred this thing for before. We've now received it. I am not concerned about having all the details about the management company that's going to look after the open space and so on, because that will follow. This is an outline application, and one would not expect to have all the details of everything, save that there will be one, and to look after the open space and the play facilities forever and a day. Therefore, having considered the matter and considered the updates, unless I hear anything to the contrary, I would propose to go along with the officer's recommendations.
Thank you very much. Councillor Holder.
Thank you, Chairman. If I understand it correctly, the gradient of the land flows from the development to the drainage ditch. And if that is the case, then presumably water landing on flood zone 1 will then percolate into flood zone 2 and then into the drainage ditch. So I would recommend that we amend condition 21 so as it says the flow of surface water in the existing watercourse at a rate no greater than the existing field runoff should be amended to the flow of water in the existing watercourse to be that following the completion of the proposed development, because the flow of water will in fact increase once this development is in place.
Councillor Holdrike, I'm not clear, and the officer may wish to ask this question, why it's going to increase. We have exactly the same ground area, and there is controls with a SUD scheme which takes the water and controls its discharge if it's excessive. So there is nothing extra that can come there from the heavens.
But surely, Chairman, if you cover that flood zone 1 with concrete, the water will flow down the gradient. So therefore, by proposing all these extra developments, you are increasing the level of water.
Except that we have a SUD scheme. Barry, would you like to explain it more eloquently than I?
I should try. I'm not promising I'll be able to. There is an increase in hard surfacing in flood zone 1, but the majority of that hard surfacing will be of a permeable nature. So it will still flow into the groundwater, and at this point, if the scheme is proposed, you will then have some attenuation so as to balance the volume of runoff that will happen in the event of a rainstorm. At the moment, if it rains, water hits the ground and just runs off at an uncontrolled rate into that ditch. If the scheme is proposed, the SUD scheme will ensure when water hits the ground in flood zones 1, it will be attenuated on site and then released at a level which is commensurate with the green field runoff rate, and not only released at a level, but there will be some time lag between when it falls and when it's released. So to all intents and purposes, this scheme could result in a betterment as a reduction in volume of water entering that ditch because of attenuation on site. So the condition that we have 21, 22 and 23 have, because the question is a very sensible question and a very real issue that we have to grapple with. We've gone to the county authority and said, are you happy with those conditions? And their response back is yes, and there may well be a betterment. Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Forresky.
Chairman, thank you for allowing me to come back. Just to pick up on that point, and as I say, we'll go back to the management company. It's the management company who will be, according to the recommendations, will be responsible for managing the scheme. So it's like we'll build a scheme, then if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, which is balmy in my opinion. And the other thing I'd like to bring your attention to is the Environmental Agency, who is a very powerful body, objects to this scheme. And in actual fact, if you go to page 22, they talk about the advice is provided to a substantive response to you. If this advice is used to refuse a planning application, we would be prepared to support you at any subsequent appeal. I'm sorry, I think that speaks volumes. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to come back.
Come back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I can come back on the management company, just to allay any fears, the legal agreement will require the management company to be a competent body, and the local authority will be able to check the credentials of the competent body. So we'll be able to ensure that anybody who takes on any management and maintenance, if indeed it's approved, isn't just some small-time builder. It is a competent body with the correct qualifications to maintain a surface water system. With regards to the Environment Agency comments, what they're saying there is that if we're not happy with the information that's been submitted, well then they won't be happy with it, and therefore they support us not being happy with it and would defend the refusal. But what we have is the information that's been submitted is acceptable for the lead local flood authority and for external consultants. So they're not objecting. I've spoken to the EA today and they're not objecting. They are happy subject to conditions. Thank you.
I think, Mary, one of the points about this is that the application, I think, has been amended somewhat. And so the first application or part of the application was deeper down into the site, into flood zone 2, and therefore there was objection, and now there is not because we've amended the plans. Councillor Stennett.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to point out, the developers say they own the watercourse, which is fair enough, we'll have to accept that. On the bottom or the top right-hand corner there, that's it there. There's a pipe there, drainage there, culvert, call it what you like, and it is 550 mil in diameter. And that must be the point where they don't own that from there on. Also, to the top end, there's another flood zone which that drawing doesn't show very well. If you see the entrance off the roundabout, flood zone 3, I would say, is more up there and water coming across the top. So there is a clear problem and a real risk of flooding through there for those houses, plus down the bottom end of that site, the existing houses. I don't know whether that's where they've already flooded, but I would say that's going to increase the flooding risk down there. And I'm sorry, Barry, I've just got to disagree with you about the flood runoff, the water runoff. That's a joke, because the roofs and the concrete area, and you cannot control water when you get in the end of September, ground's hard, it comes off at a huge rate, and all of a sudden 8 or 9 houses are flooded. And when you've seen sewage and water in people's houses, it's horrifying. And I just cannot agree with that, so I don't agree with the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of points to make. I read, and I'm sure we all have, the various letters on the website. It's perfectly clear that there is a genuine fear from the residents in Tilson's Green that their houses could be exposed to more flooding. It is a question of the runoffs, and I would agree with my councillor, the 2 councillors who have spoken regarding the runoffs. They've got to be kept to a reasonable level, and if they aren't, there's going to be more flooding. It's already flooded, and it can only get worse. We really should not approve anything which could cause problems further downstream. It appears that Surrey County Council and the developer are not totally agreed from an email of the 9th of June. And I don't think we should proceed any further until further work has actually been done and we know what we're talking about, and at the moment we don't. On the issue of the private maintenance company, I would say that even Surrey County Council has raised an interesting point there. It says, whilst the proposals indicate the use of cellular storage within gardens, they ask the question, how would those elements be maintained? And I do think that, despite the fact that this is an outline application, I really do think we need more information on that point. There is also the question of the flooding in November of last year. The letter from W.A. Charles, in fact, refers to it in 2013. I can certainly say it happened. I got phoned. There was emergency pumping out, and we don't seem to, and Charles's letter seems to try to minimise that, and I don't think it can be minimised, as you heard a moment ago, the possibility of further flooding at that point. We then have the problem of a case called Bybrook Barn Garden Centre versus Kent County Council. That was mentioned in the letter in the Sariad last week, and the legal department very kindly sent me a copy of it. The case of Bybrook Barn Garden Centre and the Kent County Council. What that case basically says, and it's based on a nuisance case, and it basically says that if the appropriate authority is aware that a culvert under their control is inadequate and they do not take appropriate steps to correct the position, then that authority could be liable for future damage to properties. Now, I think it means very simply that we should be very, very sure of what we're doing. We do not wish to leave either ourselves or Surrey County Council open to any possible cases. I also note that the developer is going to challenge the EA's flood mapping. I think that should well be done, and I think we should wait in any event for the outcome of that challenge. In simple terms, safety comes first, not only for the residents of Birch Road, but also for residents downstream. And I think this matter, unless there is further evidence, this should either be refused or deferred again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor James.
Thank you, Chairman. For those members who are inclined to agree with the officer's recommendation, I'd just like to point out for the applicant that the application is for up to 50 dwellings. On the site visit, this map was slightly inaccurate because the top road leading up to the 3,000 has a bend on it. And when you drive down it, it is very much a green site. The other side, as we're looking at access, the other side of the mini roundabout is definitely green. You can't see any of the development that is beyond it. Therefore, at the reserve matters, the two large properties, I imagine are terraced homes, might be too dominant in the green area as you come down the hill round the bend. Therefore, you might not get 50 dwellings. It might be up to the removal of possibly two very large bits on the front of the scene in order to keep the access, which we're looking at, a sort of green area. The management company, which is part of the recommendation at the end, normally, the fees for that come from the residents on it. As the officers said, that the open space is public open space, not just for the residents of the site. Therefore, those residents might in future decide that they don't want members of the public rushing around on their green open space as they pay for it in their management fee to the management company. So I think that condition ought to be slightly changed, or a note to the applicant. There are great cycle routes. There are the orangey yellow lines running along the top. On the maps that we had, it showed what they were. There is a cycle route along there, and there's an access at that top point that was pointed out on the site visit. And the third point is that, again, for the applicant, should members agree with the officer's recommendation, that the applicants might like to put in what I call holding tanks under the houses for recycled water, for flushing loos and things like that, washing the cars, because otherwise you use mains water, which adds to the rain water, which then floods on to the rest of the site, so that actually increases the volume of water. If you're watering your garden with a mains hose pipe, washing the car, you can use holding tanks underground for each house, and then when they get full, they go on to the next bit and are managed by the company. So eco-friendly houses slightly more appropriate for the site. Thank you, Chairman.
Very much. Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Chairman. I thought the Councillor Gooders explained one thing very clearly, that the really crucial issue is whether or not this development would make the flooding worse. But when he was speaking, he spoke mainly about the flooding in the road. The flooding in the road is an important thing, actually. But it seems to me that if this development slightly increased the flooding in the road, that wouldn't particularly matter a great deal. The crucial issue to me is whether or not, and what I'd like the officers to comment on, this flooding actually increases the flooding risks in the houses. Because flooding the house is an entirely different thing. It's a really horrible thing, actually. And if it does significantly increase the flooding in the houses, I would be very concerned. On the face of it, you would imagine it doesn't, actually, because the slope of the road, the slope of the land appears to go away from the houses. And whether or not it actually causes more water to run down in the direction away from the houses wouldn't necessarily, speaking to an amateur, increase the flooding in the houses. I would like a very, very clear statement from the officers that this development would not increase the flooding risk in the houses. To me, that's the actually crucial thing. Does it or does it not increase the flooding risk in the houses? I understand that, particularly on the top right-hand side, there's a flooding risk in the houses already, and that's got nothing to do with this development, really. But does this development increase the flooding risk in the houses? I've got a second very small question, actually. I noticed, actually, in page 10 of the officer's report, that there was two previous applications, a long time ago, actually, one in 97 and one in 2060. Now, I'm not clear whether they're at all relevant, but they're in the officer's report. I'd be interested to know why the previous applications were refused and whether or not it's in the slightest relevant, all this many years later. Possibly it isn't. So there's my two questions to the officers. Can they state categorically that this development, if it's approved, would not significantly increase the flooding risk in the houses? And secondly, is there any relevance to the fact that a long time ago two previous applications were refused? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With regards to increasing flood risk, I can say two things. First and foremost, this is not presented as some veritable panacea to solve the existing problems. The existing problems are, as we see on screen. Part of it is in flood zone 3, part of it is flood zone 2. However, what I can say is, through the evidence that's been submitted to the authority that has been independently assessed, demonstrates this scheme will not exacerbate flooding elsewhere, subject to mitigation controlled by way of planning condition.
Excuse me, sir, could you go? I will. Thank you very much. You're a liar, and you are one. You've sat in your office, I've given you...
Could you leave, please? Could you leave, please? Could you leave, please? You said you were going to leave, sir.
And you're saying that it's been agreed. You're going to think about it very carefully, because I'm not going to let this go. There will be a judicial review if you pass this. It's absolutely judged. And Barry, you can come by my house if you think it's so, foolproof.
Would you like to continue?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, the scheme, on the evidence presented, will not exacerbate flooding, subject to control by way of conditions, and that will be assessed by independent external bodies, and they will only be signed off from a sustainable drainage point of view if they do not exacerbate flooding. With regards to the permissions or the refusals in 1960 and 1977, they are of little relevance. They were both refused because of incursion into the countryside under a different plan at a different time. We now...
Could you please leave, sir?
I certainly will. But you know very well that the report that was presented...
Mr. Chairman, if this goes on, can we clear the whole of the public gallery?
Thank you very much. If you continue to maintain that, you will lose all your local residents and friends will not be able to attend the meeting either. Barry, had you concluded or you still got more to say?
Just very briefly to tie that point up, so the 1960 application, 1977 application are of very little relevance to this application. Thank you.
Thank you. I think probably, although I was going to say something at the very end, I think it's worthwhile me saying now, subsequently to reading all the reports and everything else, I've explored the drainage maps in the area with the help of Waverley officers, not the planning department. And the fact that the applicant now owns the northern ditch and therefore has total control over it, cleaning it and maintaining it, that is a great bonus, because you haven't got a squabble between two owners, one side of the river and one the other. As soon as you get into the northern corner, northeast corner, the last house in Birch Road, it becomes a culvert. That culvert is the responsibility of Thames Water. They are supposed to keep that clear. That culvert goes through all the way along the back of Birch Road and Summers Road, and it opens out again just before the railway line. It then goes into a culvert again under the railway line, which is the responsibility of Thames Water. It then travels across the road, the main road, and round the back of Tilsley Green, or Tilford, what is it called? The houses in Guildford Borough, and they have problems there. There are problems there because of the lack of maintenance of both Guildford Borough Council and Surrey County Council in some areas. So it's up to all of us. We can't ask the applicant to maintain the whole of this part of Surrey. It is not his responsibility, and he doesn't have the opportunity of access either. So it's got to be solved in a different way, and that shouldn't stop us building homes. It's clear to me from the way the report is written and the information we've had from the Environment Agency, the floodline, that yes, the homes in Birch Road, I don't believe, I understood the homes hadn't flooded, but the gardens had substantially. That's quite scary, but nevertheless, I don't believe they flooded. But they were close to flooding, as were lots of other homes within this area, and in the whole of Surrey, of course, 18 months ago. These areas need maintenance, and they're not getting the maintenance, and therefore we have got to pressurise, I think, Surrey County Council, ask Guildford Borough Council to do it on behalf of our residents, together with getting Thames Water to look after their culverts. It's not the responsibility of the applicant and the owner of this field.
A quick one for you, Chairman. I was going to bring that point up. I think that we need to advise our flood committee, I think the leaders on there and Jeremy Hunt's on there, about this situation for them to put pressure on the relevant authority. That's the only thing I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Councillor Hess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And can I thank all the speakers for their points. This has been a highly informative exchange. However, when it comes to asking officers to reassure us that the scheme will not exacerbate the flooding issue here, it seems to me it's a little unfair on the officers, because we don't know what the management plan will be. However, I would have no objection to supporting this proposal tonight on the basis that we will see the full management plan that brings out all the details that you yourself have brought out now, Mr. Chairman, and the need to make sure that the management plan includes all the stakeholders, including Thames Water and anybody else who has a responsibility here, to make sure that, to echo Councillor Goodrich, that the scheme will not exacerbate the existing circumstances. So, to sum up, I am perfectly happy to support this proposal as it's presented this evening, with the assurance from the officers that when this application comes back at the detailed stage, that we will then have an opportunity to ensure that whatever management plan is set up will provide the security to the people who are facing considerable anxiety about flooding, that this will not in fact pose any risk or issue for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Barry, you wish to come back?
Just to confirm, and I've just had it checked by the Chief Planner here, is that when Reserve Matters application come in on this site, they will come back to this committee for you to look at. So you will have the opportunity to assess the sustainable urban drainage system, as well as the lead local flood authority will assess it, as well as the private consultants will assess it. But you members, if you approve this scheme, will also assess it at a future point.
Thank you. If there's no further speakers, then can we go to the recommendation? Are there any amendments that we wish to make to the recommendation further than those you've read out, Barry?
If I could just pick up Councillor James's point about the attenuation tanks, just to confirm that they could be caught up within the SUDS condition. So it's a very good suggestion, and it could form part of that condition.
Thank you very much. So if we can turn to the update sheet and the revised recommendation on the back page of that grouping there, that subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement to secure the provision of 40% affordable housing, highway and transport improvements and infrastructure including primary education, play space, open space and recycling for the setting up of a management company to manage open spaces, and the SUD scheme, and subject to conditions 1 to 13 and amended but 21, and removal of condition 10 and the additional condition 34 in relation to maintenance access, and the informatives on pages 1 to 16 on pages 7 informatives 1 to 16 on pages 74 to 88, that permission be granted. Can I have a show of hands please for all who support the officer's recommendation for permission to be granted?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And any abstentions? That's 13 to 5, so that permission has been granted with a majority, a good majority, so that's it. Barry, you wish to come back before we close?
We would need a recommendation B, failure to comply. Moving on. Sorry, I'll take it back.
We're okay? We've concluded. That concludes the meeting.